At 22:40 local time, two U.S. Air Force B-52H Stratofortresses, Saucy 1-1 and Saucy 1-2, are pouring a straight, lawful line across the South China Sea at 30,000 feet. It's the sort of night when nothing is supposed to happen, and for 2 hours, nothing has. Then a radar tone screams into both electronic warfare officers' headsets at once. Unknown to the Chinese fighter clawing up through the weather to meet them, the lead bomber is carrying one piece of equipment built to make this pilot regret exactly the stunt he's about to pull. The threat boards don't blink, they bloom. A single hard contact bearing 240, 55 nautical miles out and closing at better than 600 knots. That closure rate eats the distance from Dallas to Fort Worth every 3 minutes head on. 4 seconds later, the picture sharpens into one thing every bomber crew knows on sight: a fighter radar hunting. The intercept is on. In the cockpit, the aircraft commander keys the interphone and tells the crew to hold course. A bomber task force run hangs entirely on looking as boring as it's supposed to. Same idea as walking through a sketchy parking lot. You don't change lanes, you just look like you own the place. Predictable heading, transparent intentions, flying that tells the world a grown-up Air Force is at the controls. That's the plan, anyway. The contact does not care about any of that. It's eating the gap faster than anything friendly has a right to. 2.5 miles back in combat trail, the wingman's crew picks up the same emitter a half beat behind the lead. Two sets of eyes on one threat now, both reading the same picture in the dark, and neither bomber so much as twitches. This is what a bomber task force run is supposed to look like. Right up until it isn't. That radar tone that just screamed into the electronic warfare officer or EWO's headsets, that was the ANALR-46, the B-52's first line of defense. A passive antenna net that listens across 12 to 18 gigahertz and sorts up to 16 radars at once by the rhythm and shape of their pulses. So the instant this one keyed up, the box already had a name for it, a Type 1493. The radar bolted into China's J-11 flanker. He hasn't even reached visual range. The bomber already knows precisely who's coming to the party. A few minutes later, the fighter is in visual range, and the aircraft commander pulls the undernose camera feed onto his display. There he is, the J-11 climbing out of the bomber's 6 o'clock low, twin-engine cans glowing white-hot in the infrared like two coals in a dark fireplace. This is the Shenyang J-11, China's reverse-engineered Su-27 flanker. Twin WS-10A engines pulsing 58,000 pounds of combined thrust, Mach 2.35 at altitude, 1,800-mile combat radius, 4 PL-15 beyond visual range missiles on the rails. Weapons built specifically to hit bombers from outside visual range. 46 tons of fighter, flown by one of the PLAF's best. Those two little turreted blisters under the bomber's chin feeding that picture are the EVS, Electro-Optical Viewing System. It's a heat camera and a low-light TV crammed into one ball, and on a moonless night, the heat picture turns pitch black into something close to daylight, close enough to pull a fighter out of the dark at long range. Basically, a Ring doorbell camera on steroids bolted to the nose of a bomber. Except instead of catching porch pirates, it's catching fighter jets sneaking up in the dark. And every frame of what it sees is already going to tape. The crew has eyes on the flanker long before the flanker has eyes on them, and the picture is all wrong, because his closure rate says he's not going to stop. The aircraft commander has a half second to decide, and braking is right there. Drop a wing, slide off the line, open the gap, and no board on Earth would second guess him. At 10 feet and 600 knots of closure, one twitch the wrong way turns two big airplanes into wreckage scattered across the water. He holds heading. At the last possible second, the J-11 snaps his nose up and crosses 10 feet under Saucy 1-1's chin, close enough that both pilots watch the flanker's belly fill the windscreen before it whips past. Then the wake hits. A wall of churned, rotating air slams into the lead bomber like an invisible fist. 488,000 pounds of Stratofortress heavies left through the 12 degrees of bank before the commander can wrestle it back. Autopilot kicking off, stick shaker rattling under his palms, the horizon reeling across the glass. The B-52H Stratofortress has 8 Pratt & Whitney TF-33 turbofans with 488,000 pounds gross weight, 8,800 miles of unrefueled range, cruise at 523 miles an hour. That's Los Angeles to New York in 5 hours flat. First flown in 1961 and now scheduled to keep flying into the 2050s. The youngest one on the ramp is older than most of the pilots flying it. Number 4 engine gulps the disrupted air and stumbles, its fuel-air ratio collapsing. The computer chops it to keep the engine from torching itself, then spins it straight into an automatic relight. The pilot hauls 488,000 pounds of airplane back to level while the EWO never lifts his hands off the recorder controls. 6 seconds later, number 4 is running clean. The wings are level and the heading hasn't moved a degree. And every scrap of energy that fighter just threw off is already sitting in the bomber's memory. Search pulses, the identification friend or foe transponder squawk, the data link chirp to his ground controller, all of it time-stamped to the millisecond. The Chinese pilot figures he just sent a message. He did, just not the one Beijing had in mind. He just paid for a fighter sortie's worth of fuel to hand America intelligence that would have cost a fortune to collect any other way. 2 big airplanes that just brush within 10 feet of a mid-air have one natural reflex: break formation, get low, get clear. These two do nothing of the kind. They hold the line. The EWOs stay flat calm. The only question worth asking is why. The J-11 climbs back into their altitude, rolls level, and tucks himself into a tight formation barely 130 feet off the lead bomber's left wing, tight enough to count rivets. He's not done. He wants to be seen. He wants to be felt. And most of all, he needs the bomber crew sweating. From where he's sitting, the Chinese pilot can see one B-52 and one only, the glow off his 8 engines, the silhouette off the lead pilot's head behind the glass. What he can't see, what he isn't even thinking about, is the second bomber 2.5 miles in trail and offset just enough to stay out of his mind. He has decided this is a one-on-one engagement. It isn't. At that range, his airplane stops being a contact and turns into a fire hose. The EWO spectrum display doesn't blip, it floods. Radar pulses, the IFF squawking away, a data link stream chattering back to his ground controller, every transmitter the flanker owns blooming across the scope at once. Sitting in the rack behind the EWO seat is the AN/ALR-20, the bomber's wide-spectrum eavesdropping receiver, a wide-angle security camera that records every signal in a 200-mile bubble and tags each one. Who's sending it? How strong? What kind? The ALR-46 yells when something dangerous lights up. The ALR-20 just sits in the corner, cataloging the room. And at 130 feet, the flanker isn't a guest across the room. He's standing at the microphone with his pockets turned inside out. On a separate frequency the Chinese pilot can't even hear, the wingman's aircraft commander makes a quiet decision of his own. He eases his throttles up a couple of percent and lets his bomber drift forward and inboard, gaining on the lead a few feet a second. The move hides in plain sight, far too gradual for a pilot whose attention is welded to the lead's cockpit. Over the next 90 seconds, the trailing B-52 closes from trail to half a mile abeam, sliding into the slot the flanker has no idea exists. He's boxed between 2 bombers now, and aware of just one of them. Then the wingman's EWO calls the fighter's next move before the fighter makes it. He keys up and says the J-11 is about to break right and reposition. A breath later, the J-11 breaks right and repositions. Each bomber's antenna hears the same pulse a hair apart, and that hair is enough to triangulate where he is down to the meter. It's the way 2 cell towers pin a phone neither one could find alone. So the fuse track refreshes twice a second, and the rate his beam rakes across the formation gives away his next turn before he makes it. He can't so much as twitch without getting measured from 2 angles at once, and every time he hides one side of himself, he just shows off another. The flanker slides back onto the lead's wing and holds. The most thoughtfully mapped airplane in the Western Pacific tonight, and the only man up there who doesn't know it. The undernose turret swivels and locks onto the flanker's exhaust, and as the pilot works his throttles to hold station, military power, a kick of afterburner, back off again. The infrared records the full thermal bloom at every setting. The heat fingerprint the turret just stripped off the flanker belongs to the WS-10A, China's homegrown replacement for the Russian engines on the original Su-27. Roughly 29,100 pounds of thrust aside. A jet engine's heat signature is as unique as a human voice. Its exact thermal profile at military and afterburner power has been one of the most closely guarded secrets in the People's Liberation Army Air Force, the kind of number Beijing would much prefer the West never got to measure. Imagine chasing one specific singer's voice for 2 decades, and then one night he walks up to your microphone and serenades you at point-blank range for 10 solid minutes. Every heat-seeking missile in America fields is about to get a software update, and the Chinese pilot just volunteered for the focus group. And yes, he's collecting too. That little dome in front of his canopy is a passive infrared tracker, staring straight back at 8 glowing exhausts. So what's he learning? Just about nothing. The B-52s first flew when his grandfather was in grade school, and Chinese intelligence has studied this airframe more thoroughly than anything in their own inventory. He's confirming details that have sat in a technical manual since before he was born. The bombers are walking off with a vault. He's walking off with a refresher course. That's the quietest symmetry of the whole night. He paid for this jet in the tens of millions and crewed it with one of his best, and he's spending both to take a selfie with a 52 Chevy while accidentally leaving his Tesla unlocked with the windows down. And while he preens off the lead's wing, the wingman has quietly changed the shape of the entire fight. He just hasn't noticed yet. The J-11 peels off the formation, snaps hard right, and drops below the bombers into the cloud deck. The wingman's infrared feed catches the heat spike the instant the afterburner lights, and the EWO calls it cold across their own frequency. Contact. Lead 8 o'clock low. Burner lit. Setting up again. He's rigging a second pass, dropping below the formation, swinging wide to the bomber's 7 o'clock, then pulling his nose up to come at them off the lead's rear quarter. He's already thrown a close pass and 2 minutes of shadow at them. Got nothing back. Now he wants to reach into the airplane and break something loose. He claws up out of the cloud at full military power, pitches the nose across the lead's track, and hoses scalding turbine breath straight down the inboard intakes. Then he levels just beneath them, hard right bank, watching for the flinch he came for. Number 1 engine surges. The exhaust gas temperature needle jumps past red line, and the number 2 surges a heartbeat later. The commander stands on the rudder as 34,000 pounds of thrust vanishes off the left side and tries to swing the nose around. It's a textbook gun run, except he's not carrying guns. He's carrying exhaust. Dump enough scalding exhaust down a bomber's left side intakes, and both engines on that wing choke at once. And at this weight, that much thrust gone from one side wants to roll the airplane onto its back before the crew can catch it. Here's what just happened inside those engines. A jet engine is a fussy eater. It wants clean, smooth, high-volume air marching down its throat. Feed it something else, turbulence, debris, another jet's scalding exhaust, and the compressor blades quit biting and the whole thing chokes. That's a compressor stall. A bang you feel in your chest, sometimes a tongue of flame out the intake, and thrust gone in an instant. The computer chops fuel before the engine cooks itself, then spins it back up automatically. Picture a sprinter at a dead run who takes a fist square to the sternum. He isn't finishing that stride. He wants a second to find his wind before he goes again. Dumping hot exhaust down a bomber's intakes isn't rude flying. It's a maneuver that can choke 2 engines at once on purpose. Like your neighbor revving his leaf blower straight into your open kitchen window. Except your kitchen is doing 525 miles an hour. Both of Saucy 11's engines relight inside 8 seconds. The commander catches the yaw, and the bomber never gives up an inch of altitude. Up front, the pilots trade a glance, but not a word. 2 stalls and a clean recovery is a bad 10 seconds in a simulator and a worse one over open water at night. And they just flew it without keying the radio once. Down in the EW station, the EWO's hand settles onto a consent switch. One flip and the bomber stops listening politely and starts screaming back. The flanker just dumped engine wash at point-blank range, deliberately, in a spot where a stall could have cost a motor for real. The EWO has every authority to throw that switch. He doesn't. That switch arms the AN/ALQ-172, the bomber's active electronic warfare suite. It's a combat-proven jammer that's been bending radar threats off B-52s for decades, scrambling just about every kind of radar a missile uses to find you, several of them at once. Think of it as a smart speaker that listens to every radar in the room and instantly works out which one is trying to hurt you. Then it decides whether to jam it, ghost it, or just write it all down for later. At 130 feet, later was the right answer. The moment that jammer goes hot, the encounter flips from quiet collection to active engagement, and the peacetime rules on a night like this are carved in stone. You do not throw the first electronic punch. So he sits on his hand, and every second of restraint is 1 more second on the tape. This is no panicked amateur sawing at the stick. The intercept is being flown with real skill. Tight spacing held on a 488,000-pound airplane in pitch dark, hands most air forces can't field. And that's what makes the next few minutes so telling. Skill was never the Chinese pilot's problem tonight. His problem is that the intimidation playbook only works on a target that plays along. These 2 American crews treat his best flying as background noise. They're not even impressed by it. They're just logging his control response times and waiting for him to wear himself out. He spent a close pass, a formation shadow, and a face full of jet wash, and all he's bought himself is 2 cockpits that won't give him so much as a flinch. Breaking away to set up a third run, the Chinese pilot has no idea what just happened in Saucy 1-1's cockpit. To him, the bomber is still sitting there rock steady, and the silence where the jamming should be reads like American softness, or American gear that can't keep up. On both counts, he couldn't be more wrong. 2 passes down, and he's taken everything he came for. Wake turbulence on the lead, jet wash through the intakes, not a twitch out of either airplane. He should be done here. He isn't. The most dangerous thing he does all night is still ahead of him. The wingman set catches it first. The flanker's heat signature ramps up to full afterburner. Both engines well past military power, a fast climb rate blooming underneath it. The Chinese pilot is pitching up hard from below and behind, and the EWO has it the second the numbers move. He's coming up, vertical, straight between the 2 bombers. He's committing to the maneuver of the night. Nose up past 30 degrees, both burners cooking, climbing through the bomber's block on a track that'll thread him right between the 2 airplanes. In his head, this is aggressive but recoverable. 1 bomber off his 10 o'clock, open sky to his right, and the exit dive once he tops out. In his head, there's only 1 bomber up here with him. The climb is locked in. A fighter that rotates into the vertical at full afterburner has nowhere good to go in a hurry. He's spending airspeed to buy altitude, the way a kid pedaling up a steep hill spends momentum. Halfway up, he's past the point of no return. Every second he holds the climb is a second he can't just roll level and leave. Misjudge the top of a full burner vertical, and the jet hangs there nose high with no airspeed to fly with. The worst place in the sky to run out of options. The wingman's EWO has been reading his energy state since the burner first lit, and the math agrees with the geometry. He runs out of sky between the 2 bombers, not above them. At 26,000 feet and still accelerating, he bores up into the gap. Both bombers hold dead level on the original line. Both sets of pilots, hands light on the yokes, no flinch and no correction. 2 fixed points hanging in the dark. And here's the part that takes more nerve than anything the flanker is doing. The urge to edge away from a fighter coming up through your altitude is enormous, and giving into it is how a near miss becomes a smoking hole. So the crews sit on their hands and trust the brief. The flanker sears up through 30,000 feet between them, 1,000 feet of air to Saucy 1-1 off his left, 2,000 to Saucy 1-2 off his right. The wake off a fighter pulling 7 Gs in burner hammers both bombers and rolls clean through them. Neither one breaks. Halfway up the climb, the search pulse the EWOs have heard tapping at them all night suddenly tightens. Faster, steadier, locked into a rhythm on the formation. The Type 1493 had been loafing in low-power search from the start, and now, mid-climb, it leans in hard and snaps to track mode. A tighter, high-fidelity look that stops just short of a full weapons lock. The pulse rhythm shifts the instant it does, and that is the gift that keeps giving, inside the same 30 seconds. The EWOs have his radar nailed in both the modes it runs. He came up here to rattle 2 bombers. He's filling out their threat library instead. At 32,000 feet, he runs out of climb, rolls right to set up the exit dive, away from the lead and into what he's sure is empty sky. Something catches in the corner of his eye, motion where his sensors swore there was nothing. He looks again. A second B-52, fully lit, 8 engines burning bright in the infrared, fills the right side of his canopy less than half a mile off. He's a fighter pilot. He reads the geometry in a heartbeat, and the geometry is a trap. He's boxed by 2 488,000-pound airplanes, and he committed to this climb seconds ago. It's the fighter pilot version of pulling into a parking spot and realizing the SUVs on both sides are too close to open your doors. Except he's doing it vertically at 30,000 feet. The exit dive he planned runs straight into a bomber he never tracked. The escape behind him runs back through the lead's track he just crossed. Up tips him into the combined wake of 2 heavies doing 525 miles an hour. There's no clean way out of the corner he just flew himself into. From Saucy 1-2's flight deck, the whole thing unfolds in silence and infrared. A flanker standing on his tail a quarter mile off the wing, running out of ideas in real time. close enough now that the co-pilot can make out the shapes of the air-to-air missiles hung on its rails, beyond visual range hunters built to knock down the very airplane he's sitting in. So he takes the only door left. He rolls hard and shoves the nose down, diving across the wingman's flight path with maybe 600 feet to spare, both engines screaming, and drops away into the dark. Both bombers feel the wake of him go. Neither one breaks. Leveling at 18,000 feet in the cloud, his threat receiver finally goes quiet. The B-52s never jammed him, never maneuvered, never gave up a foot of altitude. They flew their original line from start to finish while he wrapped himself around a stunt that nearly punched his ticket. And from his cockpit, the harassment landed on stone. Nothing to show for it. From the bomber's cockpits, he just topped off the richest passive collection of his career. He disengages, the bombers press on with the mission, and he flies home with no earthly idea what he left behind on 2 American hard drives. If you enjoyed this video, watch how the US humiliated the Chinese Navy in this video. Bye for now.